Without a doubt, we live in difficult times. And it's in times like this that we need inspiration. We need God to speak to us and reaffirm the purpose of life, humanity, the purpose of our very life. Why are we alive now, and why should we get out of bed today? And the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon, the preacher, the son of David, gives us the meaning of life. Let's delve into it together. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17, which is all about wealth, riches, and money. This is what the New American Standard Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on? The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. There is a grievous evil which I have seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. When those riches were lost through a bad investment and he had fathered a son, then there was nothing to support him. As he had come naked from his mother's womb, so will he return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. And this also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus will he die. So what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? Throughout his life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17. Wow, right? Imploring wealth. While there's nothing wrong with money or riches, nothing. The love of money and greediness are sins and futility. The text first introduces the examination of wealth in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Remember, vanity of pleasure and prosperity, where it views pleasure, employment, and wealth, concluding, quote, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun, end quote. In chapter 5, the text returns to the topic of wealth. Verses 5 through 17, it's about employing wealth. And verses 18 through 20, it's about enjoying wealth. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17, the text teaches that to make riches the aim and purpose of life is foolish. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and 6 sounds like the foundational text for Jesus' teachings about greed, money, and riches. Remember what Jesus said about greed in Luke chapter 12. Quote, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. End quote. The text of Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 17, discusses employing wealth toward satisfaction and greediness. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 13, satisfaction cannot come from wealth. Satisfaction. Satisfaction doesn't come to the greedy because they will never have enough, because it's like a stomach that can never be full, so the person gorges themselves to death. We see that in verses 10 and 11. Satisfaction seems like the unspoken goal in people's lives, but it's a mystery, a moving target, a mirage. Satisfaction. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10 begins with, quote, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, end quote. And Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 8 says, quote, indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, end quote. Satisfaction from physical, cultural, material sources is a false path, and yet people walk and work toward this false idol, but satisfaction comes from God. The prophet Jeremiah quotes God saying, quote, and I will fill the souls of the priests with abundance, and my people shall be satisfied with my goodness. Jeremiah 31:14. Satisfaction. Satisfaction flows from God's goodness, not material possessions, cultural achievements, or finances. According to Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12, God's goodness that satisfies is rest resulting from labor, and possibly for the working poor, while elusive for the anxious rich. The working poor tires themselves out and enjoys deep and relaxing rest in a way unfathomable to the greedy. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 14 through 17, the greedy receive only a grievous evil. Grievous evil. After all the anxiety and gorging of the greedy are left with, well, they're left with nothing. Even with wealth, the greedy can't hold on to the riches because it slips away. Chapter 5, verse 14. They have nothing to leave their family. The greedy father has lived in self-denial and mental distress and gains only futility, according to verse 17, darkness, according to 17, vexation, sickness, and anger. In the end, greed doesn't influence death, and therefore the preacher concludes that no one can accumulate enough wealth to avoid death. And so something to provide lasting, impacting advantage, and it must be able to transcend death. Because death takes it all away, wealthless, and greediness loses. Preacher challenges the cultural's focus on materialism and wealth as a source of satisfaction and greediness. I mean, that's the culture's sermon to us. Materialism and wealth is the source of satisfaction. No. The preacher rebukes us for following the world's pathway for satisfaction. His words match Jesus's, and we must beware and guard against all forms of materialism and greediness as false idols and wickedness. Just call it what it is. Instead of materialism and greediness, the author points us to God as the source of all goodness, satisfaction, and rest. God, God, God. So let us confess our sin, redirect our focus toward God, and live according to God's word and plan for our lives. Let's do it. This topic is incredibly important, and we need time to think about the purpose of our individual lives. Why do I exist? And how can I make the most of the time that God has given me? If you're interested in delving into Ecclesiastes deeper, then I wrote a book in 2018. It's 50 pages. It's $1.98 on Amazon. It's for a Kindle, an e-reader, and it's called Search for Significance, an examination of Ecclesiastes. And I will put the link to this book on Amazon in the description below as an additional resource for you if you wish.